So I do have chronic asthma. I have a very high allergy to bee stings and kale. So I have anaphylactic shock. So I am prescribed EpiPens. For a 2-pack of EpiPens right now, with my insurance, I'm looking at $553 with the EpiPens. Probably 2018 was the last time that I refilled it, just because the cost has gotten so out of control.
This is Chris Garcia. They are among a growing number of Americans who are making the difficult decision to stop buying life-saving medications like EpiPens and inhalers because of skyrocketing costs.
43 million Americans are at risk for anaphylaxis. They must carry EpiPens everywhere they go.
The injectors on those EpiPens need to be replaced each year, and those costs are soaring.
The biggest, I think, fear, is my next medical emergency gonna financially bankrupt not just me, but like my kids? Is it gonna dictate their future? Are they gonna get stuck with my medical bills?
Why does it cost so much for relatively simple devices like EpiPens and inhalers that have existed for decades? To find the answer, we went back to the 1980s when Congress passed a law that locked out competition and created monopolies over critical medical devices that people like Chris depend on to survive. And in the process, we found some good news. That could mean pharmaceutical executives are finally held liable for their crimes. In 1985, President Ronald Reagan signed into law a bill that reshaped the pharmaceutical industry in America. This law is commonly known as the Hatch-Waxman Act. The point of the act is to encourage generics to enter the market. So generic drug companies are granted access to the branded company's research, and in return for that access, brand name drugs get the exclusive right to produce and market a new drug for a specific period of time.
The whole idea was to kind of create this balance between getting drug companies to invent new medicines, and so they had those kind of incentives, but also giving incentives for generics to enter the market. Generics are very important for the market because when generics enter, if, like for example 5 or more generics enter, prices can drop at 90%.
The only issue? Hatch-Waxman requires that generics trying to enter the market don't infringe on any of the branded company's existing patents. The FDA keeps track of this through something called the Orange Book, which lists approved drugs that have existing patents. Because drug companies can easily abuse the patent system by expanding existing patents without changing much at all, the Orange Book has been a tool used by Big Pharma to stifle competition and drive prices up.
Here's what happens with the Orange Book. A drug company gets a patent, and that patent, as you know, lasts for 20 years from discovery or 10 years from the time it goes on the market. That's all fine. But somebody comes along and says, well, now I think the patent is expired, so I want to do a generic. All sounds great, right? Except the FDA does not watch the drug companies on what they list or what timing they list. And they just, in effect, count on the drug companies to be entirely truthful about those patents. And what we've discovered is the drug companies are not truthful. So they will list the wrong dates. They will list things under patent that are not under patent. They will expand the patents they have. Why? All to fight off the folks who are doing the generics.
Companies are using the patent system in order to delay competition from coming in. So for example, a generic company that might want to bring in a lower cost version of a drug with an inhaler or a device might not be able to because pharmaceutical companies, the branded ones, are using the patent system to block them or make arrangements and deals that might delay them from coming into the marketplace.
Here's a real-world example of how this works. Take a look at these two devices. This is the very first FDA-approved EpiPen patent from 1987. And this is the most recent patent from 2017. Despite over 3 decades of development and multiple owners, the patent design remains virtually unchanged. Because of the rules in the Orange Book, the minor changes that have been made have been used to lock competition out and drive prices up. Mylan, the current owner of EpiPens, took over in 2007, and since then, the price of EpiPens have skyrocketed, even though the technology has barely changed.
What companies have started doing is They just started listing devices on there. The Hatch-Waxman Act says that's not supposed to happen. You're only supposed to list things that have the active ingredient in.
The Orange Book takes on this powerful authority to fend off the competition that is exactly the competition we wanted to see in the drug industry.
And it gets worse. The Orange Book says if there's any possibility that a generic could be infringing on a branded drug, the original brand can sue.
A court litigation process starts, and that suspends any kind of entry until 30 months. As a result of that, the branded industry started developing new strategies. Like with any law, you start to create new games and new ways of actually finding the loopholes.
Big Pharma manufacturers use what is known as pay-for-delay arrangements to keep generics from entering the market.
If a generic wanted to come in, you've got all these patents, you can't litigate through them. The branded company will say, well, I'll pay you $2 billion to stay off the market, or to delay your entry for another year or 2 years. So the longer they can delay a generic coming in, that's an extra revenue generator. So it pays to get those patents. Think about it. Probably costs about $40,000 to file for a patent. It costs you millions to litigate it. And the longer you delay someone, you're making millions, billions even.
They get their patents and they have a lock on it, and it doesn't allow for competition. It allows them to keep the prices as high as they want, and it's not something like I can say, yeah, this isn't something I need, this is something I can walk away from.
So this is how the whole system's working. Because of the pressure of Wall Street and the shareholders, pharmaceutical companies have moved from just being companies that want to actually develop drugs to essentially becoming money machines.
One thing is clear. The industry needs to change. Activists and lawmakers are pushing for new regulation that would reduce drug prices and open up more of the market to generics.
The FDA has not done nearly enough to deal with patent abuses, and understand this, that means the American people are paying. We pay every time we go to the pharmacy and have to shell out more money. We pay every time our insurance premiums go up, and we pay through our taxes. Through the fact that Medicare, for example, is paying more, Medicaid is paying more than they otherwise would have to pay. So the abuses that Big Pharma engage in cost every one of us real money.
In 2021, President Biden signed an executive order to improve competition and reduce prices for prescription drugs. But advocates say that federal government can and should be doing more.
Well, there's a lot that the FDA could do. The FDA, they could really go back to what the intention was of the Hatch-Waxman Act. There's a lot of ways that they're implementing it in a much broader way than they should be.
This means rewriting the rules of the Orange Book and ensuring oversight to prevent patent misuse and price gouging and allow more generics to enter the market. It also means holding the FDA accountable for the patents they allow to enter the Orange Book.
So what I did is wrote a letter to the FDA and said, you guys need to be monitoring what's happening in the Orange Book. You need to force these drug companies to move back their description of the patent to the narrower thing they actually have the patent on instead of some expanded view of it. You need to put some penalties in place if they are deceiving the public.
On September 14th, the Federal Trade Commission finally took action. The commission issued a warning to brand name drug manufacturers that they could face legal action for improperly listing patents in the Orange Book. After decades of patent abuse by Big Pharma, this is a historic step. Finally, pharmaceutical executives could be held criminally liable for inflating the price of life-saving medications.
The industry has learned how to make it beneficial for itself, and we need a severe course correct to get it back on track.
For millions of patients like Chris, this issue is critical.
I think it's really urgent. The inflation, the enormous debt that the pandemic caused, I think, it's more urgent than ever for people to be able to afford their medications.
Thank you so much for watching our video. If you'd like to see more stories like this one, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel to get more Perfect Union in your feed. And if you have any ideas for stories that you would like for us to investigate, just drop them in the comments below.